What if the toy you thought was innocent turned out to be the source of your worst nightmares? When a babysitter discovers a peculiar doll that seems to have a life of its own, she unwittingly opens the door to a sinister presence that refuses to be ignored. As the night unfolds, the line between playtime and terror blurs, leading to a chilling revelation that will haunt her forever. Make sure to subscribe to disturbing stories like the video and share it with your friends to dive deeper into the unknown. Story 1. The Man in the Attic. From the beginning of that night, something felt off. The children's parents had hurried out to dinner, leaving me alone with 5-year-old Clara and 3-year-old Lucas. It was a huge 2-story house with wide hallways and an attic that creaked whenever the wind blew. As soon as I closed the door behind them, a chill ran down my spine, but I brushed it off. I had always been brave, and after all, it was supposed to be just a quiet night looking after 2 adorable kids. Or at least that's what I thought. I put Clara and Lucas to bed around 8. They fell asleep quickly, and with the house silent, I sat on the couch and opened my book. But I couldn't read more than a few pages. You know that unsettling feeling that you're not alone? Like someone's watching you but you can't see them? That's exactly how I felt, but I tried to shake it off with a nervous laugh. Then I heard the first noise. It sounded like something moving above me in the attic. I closed the book and sat still, trying to listen more carefully. Maybe it was just the wind shifting some old boxes, I thought. Old houses like these tend to make noises. But the sound became clearer, more deliberate, like someone slowly dragging their feet across the floor. Maybe it's just rats, I told myself. But rats don't make footsteps. I sat there for a few minutes, my heart racing. Finally, I decided to check on the kids. I crept upstairs, taking care not to make a sound. Lucas was fast asleep, and Clara stirred only slightly when I peeked in. At least they were safe. Just as I turned to leave, I heard it again, heavy, slow footsteps. This time I was sure they were coming from the attic. My breath quickened. I left the kids' door ajar and went downstairs to grab my phone. I tried calling the parents, but the call went straight to voicemail. I knew I couldn't leave the children alone, but I also couldn't ignore the noise. I grabbed a chair from the kitchen and placed it under the attic hatch in the hallway. My whole body was trembling, but I had to see what was going on. I climbed onto the chair and, with some effort, opened the hatch. The smell of old wood and dust filled the air. I switched on the flashlight on my phone and pointed it upward. That's when I saw it. In the farthest corner of the attic, there was a pile of blankets and a plate with leftover food. As my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I noticed something that made my heart stop. Someone was crouched there. A human silhouette, perfectly still, as if waiting. I couldn't stop myself. I let out a muffled scream. The man slowly lifted his head and our eyes met. He smiled. It was a calm smile, almost as if he knew me. Shaking, I jumped off the chair and ran to the kids' room. I locked the door and pressed my ear against it, trying to hear if he was coming down. Nothing. Just silence. I needed help, but I didn't want to scare the children. I grabbed my phone and called the police. Whispering, I explained what had happened, and they assured me that a patrol car was on its way. All I had to do was wait. Then I heard the footsteps again. This time they were on the stairs. I froze. He was coming down from the attic. The door to the kids' room felt too flimsy to keep anyone out. Lucas stirred in his bed, likely sensing my fear. Clara opened her eyes and sleepily asked, "Is someone here?" The only thing I could do was put a finger to my lips, urging her to stay quiet. The minutes dragged by like hours until, finally, I heard the sound of sirens. Someone pounded on the front door and I rushed to open it. 2 officers entered with their guns drawn and headed straight for the attic. I held the children close, trembling, while one officer went up and the other stayed with me, asking if I was sure about what I had seen. They spent a few minutes in the attic before coming back down. Then I heard something that made my blood run cold. "There's no one up there," one officer said, "but we found a makeshift bed and some clothes. Looks like someone's been living here for a while." Tears welled up in my eyes. I knew I had seen someone. I knew he was there. And somehow he had managed to escape before the police arrived. The children's parents returned shortly after, horrified by what had happened. The police investigated, but they never found the man in the attic. They said it was probably a homeless person, but I never believed that. Because deep down, I knew that man wasn't there by chance. He had been watching me, waiting. And that night, I was lucky to escape before he did what he intended. Since that day, I've never taken another babysitting job. No matter how much they offer, No amount of money is worth the feeling of knowing that someone might be watching you in the dark, waiting for the right moment to appear. Story 2: The Figure at the Door. As soon as the children went to bed, silence filled the house. It was one of those nights when the air feels heavier, as if something invisible is lurking, just waiting. The parents had warned me they wouldn't be back before midnight, so after checking that everything was in order, I threw myself on the couch and turned on the TV to pass the time. The house was large and modern, with big windows facing the backyard and the street. All the curtains were open, which made me feel a bit exposed, but I preferred it that way to keep a clear view of the outside. Around 10 o'clock, while watching some random movie, a movement caught my attention from the corner of my eye. At first, I thought my mind was playing tricks on me, but then I saw it. Someone was standing outside watching the house. It was a tall figure, completely still, with its face hidden in the darkness. Just a silhouette against the dim light of the moon. My muscles tensed and my breathing grew heavy. For a second, I hoped it was a neighbor or maybe someone from the family coming home early, but my instincts told me otherwise. The figure didn't move. It just stood there staring through the glass. I got up slowly, my heart pounding, trying not to make any noise. Every second felt like an eternity. I stepped closer, but the figure remained frozen, as if it wanted to be seen. I didn't try to open the door, just stood there hoping for some movement to explain who it was. Then, without warning, it took a step back and vanished into the darkness of the yard. My mind raced. It must be a misunderstanding, I told myself, trying to stay calm. Maybe it was a neighbor or a prank by some teenager. But deep down I knew better. I locked the glass door and closed all the curtains, hoping to push away the growing fear. I went back to the couch and grabbed my phone. I needed to do something, but what would I say? There was a stranger in the yard, but now they're gone? I sat there with the phone in my hand, listening to nothing but the thudding of my heartbeat in my ears. Then I heard it. A faint noise, like nails softly scratching the outside of the glass door. My entire body froze. He was back, but now I couldn't see him. The curtains were drawn, and I wasn't sure if it was safer to look or pretend I hadn't noticed anything. I went to the kitchen and grabbed a knife. The cold steel in my hand didn't give me the sense of security I'd hoped for, but it was all I had. I took a deep breath and, with trembling legs, pulled back a small corner of the curtain. Nothing. The yard was empty. But the feeling of being watched wouldn't go away. It was as if he were somewhere nearby, observing, waiting for me to make a mistake. I walked through the house, checking every door and window. I locked everything I could, checking once, twice, 3 times. I decided to check on the children to make sure they were safe. They were both sound asleep, blissfully unaware of the silent terror that was consuming the house. I stood there for a few minutes, listening to the soft rhythm of their breathing, trying to steady my own. When I returned to the living room, my heart nearly stopped. The glass door was open. I knew I had locked it. A lump formed in my throat and I struggled to catch my breath. I ran to the kitchen, grabbed my phone, and called the police. I told them there was an intruder in the house, and they said a patrol car was on its way. I tried to stay calm, but every second dragged on endlessly. I hid behind the couch, from where I had a partial view of the door. The air felt thicker, as if something unseen was slipping into the house through the open doorway. Then I saw him again. He was inside the house. The same dark silhouette, standing still, watching me. For some reason, he didn't approach. It was as if he wanted to see how far I could go before I broke down. My entire body shook, but I couldn't move my feet. The sound of police sirens echoed in the distance. Within seconds, the figure turned and slipped out through the open door. I ran to it and locked the door with trembling hands. When the officers arrived, I explained what had happened. They searched the house and the yard, but found no one. It was probably someone trying to break in, one of the officers said. You were lucky. I didn't feel lucky at all. That night, the figure didn't come to harm me. He came to test me, to make me afraid. And the worst part is, he succeeded. Story 3: The Possessed Toy. I was sure it was going to be a quiet night. It was a cozy house with toys scattered on the floor and walls filled with colorful drawings made by the kids. Clara, 7 years old, seemed shy at first but soon greeted me with a smile. Her parents left around 8, giving simple instructions. She likes to play a little before bed, but don't let her stay up too late. Easy, I thought. Little did I know what was coming. Clara ran straight to the playroom and I followed. As soon as I entered, I noticed a huge doll sitting in a corner of the shelf. It had green eyes, curly red hair, and an expression that seemed almost human. Those old-fashioned dolls always gave me the creeps, but I kept that to myself. Clara went straight to the doll and held it close like it was her best friend. "This is Emily," Clara said, hugging the doll tightly. "She doesn't like everyone." I chuckled and asked, "Does she like me?" Clara became serious for a moment, as if she were really listening to something. "I'm not sure yet," she replied with a shrug. That made me uneasy, but I brushed it off. Kids have vivid imaginations, right? We played for a while, and then I convinced her to head to bed. I tucked Clara in, and she insisted Emily sleep with her. I carefully placed the doll beside her and turned off the lights. "Good night," I whispered, but Clara said something strange. "Good night, and be careful with Emily." That sent a chill down my spine. I closed the door and went downstairs, laughing at myself. I'm just overthinking it, I thought. But soon my laughter turned into unease. I had just settled on the couch when I heard a noise from upstairs. It sounded like light footsteps, as if someone was walking down the hall in socks. I froze for a moment, then rushed upstairs to check on Clara. When I opened her bedroom door, I found her peacefully asleep, but the doll was sitting in the chair facing the bed. I was sure I had left it lying down. My mind raced for an explanation. Maybe Clara had woken up and moved it without me noticing. Maybe. I placed the doll back in bed and left, trying to push the strange feeling away. But it clung to me. Every time I closed my eyes, I could see the doll's expression. Those green eyes seemed to follow my every move. Then I heard Clara whispering. I rushed upstairs, and as soon as I entered, the whispering stopped. Clara was sitting up in bed, her back to me as if she had been talking to someone, and the doll was still in the chair. "Clara, who were you talking to?" I asked, trying to sound calm. She turned slowly, her face drowsy, and murmured, "Emily. She said she doesn't like you." I swallowed hard, unsure of what to say. I picked up the doll and placed it in the hallway this time. Then I kissed Clara's forehead and made sure she drifted back to sleep. But the peace didn't last long. Around midnight, I heard a soft dragging sound. I went to the hallway, and there was the doll, leaning against Clara's bedroom door. It was as if it had moved on its own, trying to get back to Clara. My heart pounded. I grabbed the doll and placed it in the living room inside a toy bin. Then I returned to the bedroom, struggling to keep it together. I was just starting to relax when I heard it, a faint giggle. A laugh that was not Clara's. The sound came from the hallway. I jumped up and rushed over. The toy bin was overturned, and the doll sat in the middle of the living room, staring at me with those vivid, mischievous green eyes. Without thinking twice, I grabbed the doll and stuffed it inside a closet, locking the door. My mind scrambled for rational explanations. Maybe Clara was playing a prank on me. Maybe it was just a coincidence. But none of it made sense. When Clara's parents finally arrived, I hurried to explain what had happened. The mother went pale as soon as I mentioned the doll. "You put Emily out of the room?" she asked, almost in shock. I nodded. She took a deep breath and whispered, "Emily belonged to the daughter of the house's previous owners. The little girl died here, and ever since, Clara says the doll talks to her." Chills ran down my spine. The father tried to laugh it off, calling it superstition, but the mother seemed convinced something was wrong. That night, I left the house without looking back, swearing I'd never set foot there again. And even now, after all this time, I still dream of those green eyes watching me from the dark. Because the truth is, the doll didn't just want to be with Clara. It wanted much more. If you enjoyed this chilling story, don't forget to subscribe to Disturbing Stories for more terrifying tales like this one. Share the video with your friends, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our spine-tingling videos. That way you'll never be alone on the darkest nights.